Bonjour.
Good afternoon. This is meeting number 76 of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. I'd like to thank our witnesses today. We have with us Ms. Shepherd, the Commissioner of Lobbying, who is coming for the purposes of our study of the main estimates, 2013-14, vote 45 under Treasury Board. And as is customary, she is joined by Mr. Bergen and Mr. LeBlanc. You will have 10 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we'll move on to questions for the Commissioner on her report. You now have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Today to discuss the main estimates for the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying. I would also like to take the opportunity to highlight some of my recent accomplishments of my office and outline my priorities for this fiscal year. I am joined by Renee LeBlanc, Deputy Commissioner, and Mr. Bruce Bergen, Senior Counsel. The total 2013-14 main estimates for my office is $4.4 million. It is made up of $4 million, which is comprised of the salary envelope and other operating expenditures, as well as $0.4 million for the employee benefits plan. I have no discretion for the employee benefits plan, which is a statutory vote. Therefore, I have $4 million to deliver my mandate. I have a complement of 28 employees. Even though the reference level for my office has remained constant since I became Commissioner in July 2008, we absorbed the impact of the cost containment measures announced in Budget 2010. The cost containment measure meant that my office had to absorb the growth in salary costs from ratification of collective agreements for the last 3 years. This has put pressure on my budget, particularly on the salary envelope. In addition, starting this year, my budget is now reduced by 5% as a result of Budget 2012. Le registre des lobbyistes.
The Registry of Lobbyists is at the core of the regime for ensuring the transparency of lobbying activities. Currently, there are more than 5,000 registered lobbyists. The registry also contains information on about 3,000 active registrations. These figures have remained fairly stable since 2008. A budget of $812,000, including salaries for 7 full-time employees, is dedicated to maintaining the registry, providing guidance and technical support to registrants, and responding to inquiries.
Appearance on main estimates in 2012, I explained how I would implement a 5% reduction of my budget. I mentioned to this committee that I would first defer development of the lobbyist registration system, and second, hire a system specialist to reduce my dependency on system consultants. This explains that although this year's budget has decreased, a full-time employee was added to this program. Although system developments will be deferred, essential maintenance work will continue. I have full confidence that the registry will continue to meet the needs of both Canadians and lobbyists in ensuring transparency of lobbying activities. Considerable work was done last year to upgrade key features of the system, focusing in particular on search and reporting capabilities. These features were launched in September 2012 and in February 2013. Users have told us that it is now a lot easier to mine the wealth of information that resides in the registry. In 2012-13, an internal audit of the lobbyist registration system was conducted to examine the management controls and practices of the system. The scope of the audit included a range of activities, including the governance of the system, the registration and reporting processes, registration staff training, and IT security. The audit concluded that appropriate measures were in place to support the lobbyist registration system. This means that the information provided by lobbyists is accurately captured in a timely and reliable manner. Opportunities for improvements were found in the management of IT services in support of the registry, and this will be my focus in 2013-14. Our policies, directives, and procedures regarding IT management will be reviewed and revised as required. This will ensure that the integrity of the system will continue to be protected as we move forward. Moreover, the system documentation will be reviewed and updated, and a process will be established to ensure the documentation remains current in the future. Permettez-moi maintenant.
Let me now turn to education and research, which is another key component of my mandate. The Lobbying Act is a fairly complex piece of legislation. The time and resources I invest in outreach are essential to fostering compliance. I allocate $810,000 of my annual budget to public education activities, including salaries for 7 full-time employees. In 2012-2013, my staff and I met with more than 900 individuals, including lobbyists, public office holders, as well as parliamentarians and their staff. Interestingly, I am frequently asked to address academics and students from various Canadian post-secondary institutions who want to know more about our regime and its impact on transparency.
During the last fiscal year, my office started reaching out actively to new registrants. When a lobbyist registers for the first time with my office, a registration advisor contacts a new registrant to provide personal assistance and offer guidance and training on the registration system. This approach resulted in increased efficiency and accuracy when inputting the requested information in the system. It is also an excellent way to ensure greater awareness of requirements of the Lobbying Act, which translates into better compliance. In addition to administering the Act, I am also responsible for ensuring compliance with the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. The code is important because it ensures that lobbying is done at the highest ethical standards. The lobbying legislation has been reviewed several times in the last decade, yet the code has remained unchanged since it was instituted in 1997. The Act states that I shall develop a lobbyist code of conduct. Based on my experience in administering the code, I felt that it was time to review the code to ensure it was clear for lobbyists who must be in compliance with it. I plan on launching a consultation this fall to help inform my review of the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. Next year will be dedicated to sharing the results of the consultation and to propose, if any, amendments to the code. I plan to consult with stakeholders on any amendments. I will keep the committee members informed as the process is progressing. J'aimerais maintenant vous entretenir.
I would like to now turn to my office's compliance function. Review and investigation activities is allocated $1.1 million, including salaries for the equivalent of 8 full-time employees. This year, I submitted 2 reports on investigation for tabling in Parliament. I also continue to refer files to the RCMP when I have reasonable grounds to believe that a breach of the Act has occurred. For the first time since the coming into force of the Lobbying Act, charges have recently been laid against an individual for a breach of the Act.
The number of administrative reviews I close continues to keep pace with the number I open. When I became Commissioner on July 2, 2008, I inherited a caseload of 40 administrative review files and 6 investigation files. I have dealt with all but 2 of them. Since becoming Commissioner, I have initiated 101 administrative review files and completed 105. During 2012-13, a new approach was developed by my office to determine the priority level of each file. The new process is designed to help manage the workload in the office and estimate file completion dates. As new cases are opened, the priority standing of existing cases is reassessed, based on a range of factors with a view to avoiding any given file becoming too old. The objective is to ensure that priority cases are dealt with in a timely manner and reduce the inventory of older files. In addition, in the coming year, it is my intention to develop a more strategic approach to compliance verification. The current compliance monitoring practices will be improved by introducing a risk-based approach that includes in-depth analysis of registration behaviors within selected areas of the economy or related to specific issues. This will assist in determining where resources need to be allocated in terms of either education or compliance. Les services internes.
Internal services are allocated about $1.7 million, including salaries of 6 full-time employees. Given the small size of my office, my approach is to acquire the majority of internal services from other organizations. The service arrangements I have put in place are working well. They provide me with access to the broad range of expertise I need in corporate services to meet my accountabilities as deputy head at an affordable cost.
Established a program evaluation function over the last year. My office will continue to implement this program in the coming year. It is a critical component to my ability to offer further evidence of the effectiveness of our activities. This will also help me identify where further improvement can be made to become even more effective. As you may know from my presentation, I have managed to put in place the appropriate structure to mitigate the impact of the budget reduction on my ability to deliver on my mandate. As I have mentioned at my last year appearance on main estimates, my office is a lean organization. My focus is on the priorities necessary to deliver on my mandate, which I have outlined in my opening remarks. Should the government decide to make changes to the Lobbying Act in the coming year, I will need to adjust my priorities accordingly. J'ai hâte de relever les défis.
I'm looking forward to the activities and opportunities that this year will bring. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks. I look forward to answering any questions you and the committee members may have. Thank you, and thank you for your remarks. We'll now start with Mr. Angus for 7 minutes.
Madame Shepherd, for coming, gracing our committee with your presence again. We have enormous respect for the work you do, and we understand that you do this on a tight budget that seems to get tighter all the time. I'm interested in the issue of the compliance function, whether or not, in the important work you do, if you have the tools you require, both financially and legislatively.
Well, in terms of resources, I'm spending this year approximately, or spending $1.1 million. That includes the funds for a director for investigators and a compliance officer. As the strategic operating review show when that was done in 2011, that those are sufficient for managing the caseload, and I see that from the progress that we're making in terms of keeping pace with the files while managing to deal with the old ones. In terms of the tools that I would say, yes, which what I've mentioned in terms of the administrative, in the review of the legislation of the Act, what would facilitate, the Act would be having the ability to administer administrative monetary penalties in terms of showing, a continuum of compliance measures for the different breaches of either the Act or the Code.
Thank you. And the AMPs have seemed to work well in other jurisdictions where they're being used in terms of ensuring that people understand the importance of registering and following the rules. Am I not correct?
The two provinces that have the ability to issue administrative monetary penalties in Canada is Alberta and BC. Yeah. And BC, Alberta to date, I don't believe has issued any, but BC has, and I would say yes.
You'd mentioned about that with the RCMP, it's the first time charges have been laid, and when we had looked at the statutory review of the Act, one of the things that was concerning to us was the issue that if you begin an investigation and then it's taken over by the RCMP, your investigation is suspended, and yet up until the charging of Mr. Bruce Carson with influence peddling on, was it July 27th, 2012, the RCMP had never followed through on any single investigation. We felt that was a problem. So I don't know what stage of the work you were dealing with Mr. Carson, but if the RCMP don't follow up, is that the end of the road for you?
Well, in terms of when I refer a file to the RCMP, it's because I have reasonable grounds to do so. If the RCMP chooses not to proceed, which they have done in a number of cases that I've sent over, then I can look at a file when it comes back and determine whether I have sufficient grounds to continue with a lobbyist code of conduct investigation, which I have done and tabled reports to Parliament.
Thank you. On the statutory review that was done by this committee last year, what is your view of our recommendations, and what is your view of the response that you've heard from government?
Well, I was very pleased with what I saw that came out of the committee in terms of it seemed to quite adequately consider the recommendations I had put forward, and based on what was heard from other witnesses. In terms of the government's response as well, I mean, I think it quite seriously considered all of the things that have been put forward. I mean, they have said yes outright, I guess, in a couple of cases, clear intent to follow through on others, and some are under further consideration. I think in all cases, any of the changes that are being looked at will strengthen the Act in terms of increased transparency and perhaps enforcement powers.
So do you have ongoing consultations with the government about implementing the recommendations, or was that just an initial response? Are you planning on meeting with them?
Well, in terms of the independence of the office, I mean, what I would expect is that because I'm the administrator of the Act, that I'll be consulted as to what would actually conspire in terms of how much time it might take me, for example, to make changes to the registration system in order to do some of the changes that the government may intend to do, or how much costs might be, for example.
Thank you. On page 7 of the report on your plans and priorities, you've identified as one of the priorities the need to take this more strategic approach for compliance verifications. Can you give us a better understanding the need for this approach? Like, what are you looking at doing?
Well, right now, when we do what I call media monitoring, right, which will, and we do further analysis to determine for organizations, for example, where maybe after a little bit of analysis, we determine maybe they should be sent an advisory letter to let them know that there is an act, and so that they can make determinations. We also will open administrative reviews or investigations based on either complaints or what we see in the media, for example. Those are reactive sort of measures, and so the idea was, how can we be more proactive? Can we look at particular sectors of the economy with the wealth of information that exists in the registry, and looking at the information, compare and contrast, let's say, within companies of a particular sector. Are there any patterns? Is there something we want to maybe issue letters or follow up on to see if we can get better compliance in terms of disclosure? Are there emerging issues that might be coming up in terms of policies or programs, and looking at saying, are the groups that we are expecting to be registered actually registered? So it's just being a little bit more proactive and trying to ensure the compliance.
So you've had cost containment measures in 2010. You're facing it again. As you say, the salaries still have to go up. The other issues you still have to deal with. Given the amount of 5,000 plus lobbyists, maybe I'm throwing you a softball here, but if we're going to actually be able to ensure that government is clean and that back doors are not being opened to friends, do you have the resources you need to do that job fully?
When I did the strategic operating review, it did indicate that I had a lean organization, but that I had the right resources and competencies in areas where I didn't. That's why I made, as I announced last year, the difficult decision to cut 2 positions to hire, and I've now hired that capacity. If things stay, I can't afford to be cut further. I think, as I mentioned, being cut further would affect my ability to deliver on the mandate.
Merci, merci pour vos réponses.
Thank you. Mr. Button, you now have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner, and your colleagues for being here today, and again, giving us a better sense, I think, as a committee as to the role that your office is playing and the challenges that you are facing. I see in the mains that all but $430,000 of your authorities are voted. Can you explain what the $430,000 is? Was that the employee benefits and so on that you were referring to in your opening?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so that's statutorily mandated. I mean, that's obviously what has to be paid for the benefit plans for each of the 28. I think you said there was 28.
I have a complement of 28 FTEs, yes.
Complement of 28, okay. Now, I think you also said that 7 of those are dedicated to what you would call the public education aspects of your office. Can you give me a little bit more detail? What are those 7 individuals within the organization sort of doing on a day-to-day basis? What is their specific role versus obviously the other 21 that are there, which I assume are more compliance and administrative driven? Give me a better sense again as to what their role is in your office.
In terms of that 7, what's interesting for reporting purposes is that's part of a structure called like the program alignments architecture, which is done for reporting purposes. The actual individuals consists of a senior communications officer, a senior policy analyst, and a policy analyst. The rest of the component is actually made up of other individuals' time within the office dedicated to that particular function. For example, it consists, a portion of my time, my deputy's time, which helps make up the remaining part of that.
So is the role of your office, or do you see the role of your office that you are to proactively get out and educate, or are you relying on these 5,000 lobbyists that are part of this system to make sure that they're making sure they know what the rules are, the do's and don'ts, the compliance requirements? So are you playing a more proactive role to get to them to make sure they are complying? Because we want to assume that most people want to play by the rules. They want to know what the rules are. They want to be clear on them so that nobody's getting caught up in a situation that they shouldn't be caught up in. So is it a role where you're proactively reaching out into the lobbyist community, or are you kind of waiting for the phone to ring and then just answering a question that somebody might have?
Well, I have an education mandate, and as I've said before, committee, I believe that one of the best ways of ensuring compliance is making sure everybody understands the rules. So I take very much doing a proactive of approach. We've looked at doing a policies and procedures manual, and also working on a strategic sort of plan in terms of outreach. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, for example, on the registration side, when a new registrant is coming forward, we actually follow up with them, and there are webinars that are being done by the registration unit on a pretty regular basis, and they're being met with success. I've mentioned that myself and my team met with 900 individuals last year. That included lobbyists, public office holders, and parliamentarians. So we're very much getting the word out there that here is the Lobbying Act there, and also emphasizing the fact that there is a lobbyist code of conduct as well. So it's not just that lobbyists are to ensure that they're complying with the Act, but also that they're complying with the lobbyist code of conduct as well.
We just had the Privacy Commissioner here, and one of the things she was mentioning is that her office is going to be moving, and one of the reasons for that was to take advantage of some shared services that perhaps she could share with other agencies in the new building in which they're going to be moving to in Gatineau, to get a few agencies under the same umbrella and then share some services, which would hopefully help everybody. We are in a restraint situation now. We're trying to minimize the growth of government, or at least try and freeze the costs. And through your estimates, you've indicated your 28 FTE for the next couple of years, and your base budget. And actually, you're doing a good job of actually coming forward with some minor reductions in your core budget. Have you looked at, is that part of the strategy as well? Have you looked at other either agencies or government departments in which you can have better cooperation and shared services to actually reduce your overhead and your administrative expenses?
Well, the answer is yes. I'm also part of the Agents of Parliament, and collectively we are looking at ways that we can do shared services. There is a group that's moving first, that's going to be able to probably put some things in place faster. It's still at preliminary stages, so I don't have specific examples at this point. But what I can say is I'm already in a number of arrangements with service providers. For example, HR, finance, and IT are actually provided through service agreements. So I am taking advantage, for example, of Public Works, which has shared services on their HR side.
Good. I still have some time, or am I? Yep. I noticed some year-over-year fluctuations in the office's internal services program activity. Can you explain the reduced spending authorities between 2011-12 and 2012-13? Can you also explain why this year's request for authorities has increased?
Which page are you at?
Well, internal services program.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if I'm recalling...
Look at the page here.
ETHI?
Yeah, it could be. I'm sorry, I haven't got the page number.
10? Where it says 1749 and then 1705?
Yep.
Well, some of the expenditures that we have, I think, had in the main estimates before is because we've had some of the superannuation payments and the terminations that occurred. I think it was in 12-13, last year's.
They're one-time smaller fluctuations because of certain circumstances. We all know that when you put a budget together, you do your best guesstimate, right?
Yes.
Things can happen, and the actuals aren't always what the budget numbers are, and that's because you've had an anomaly in one year or something has happened. So as long as you can properly report back as to why that is, then I think that's certainly fine. Are you?
Okay.
Is that good? Yep. Merci beaucoup, Mr. President.
Your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned in your opening statement about the new search features available. Could you just give us a little bit more idea of how these new search features are working? And do you have any statistics on who is using the search features? Have you noticed increased traffic through your website on the search features?
I believe in terms of the question, in terms of searches that were done last year, I think it was 175,000 actual searches. In terms of users of the system, I think the media is using it quite a bit. We're seeing a lot of stories now on like the Lobby Monitor, for example, in a day in the life of the registry. In terms of what it's allowing you to do is it allows you to search any field. I mean, some of the questions where people couldn't just any field that's inputted, like public office holder, departments. I mean, those searches can be done. Trends can be looked at. It's easier to search communication reports. So it's making it a lot easier, and I think that, it's possible to do downloads and stuff like that as well now. That wasn't.
How quickly are you getting the data into the search engine?
Well, the data, as soon as the registration is up on the system, I believe. I mean, it's something I can verify. My understanding is it's once the registration data is live. Yeah.
Search is the live database.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You talked about the consultation you're doing on the lobbyist code of conduct. Getting an outline of how that consultation is going to work this fall. Who are you going to try to target for consultations?
Well, because of the limitations of the budget, I'm going to take largely advantage of the web, which will, it's so anybody checking the site will be able to. That said, I've been doing, in my outreach that I've been doing now, especially with like public office holders, I've been mentioning the fact that I was going to be launching this consultation and that I will be writing to particular groups, letting them know that this is up on the website and encouraging them to participate. So for our parliamentarians, for example, I'm hoping we'll as well look at it and provide comments.
And the outcomes will go in the code of conduct, or you'll make those recommendations to go?
Well, what I'm expecting to, like with the consultation that I launched in the fall, will be to see, to make an informed view of what people's opinions are. Does it need to change? Are there amendments that I need to make? So then I would go back, I would see in the second year of here are the results of the consultation, and also whether any amendments if that comes out from the review.
On the investigation side, how many investigations do you have ongoing right now?
I believe there are 5 investigations ongoing.
And what's the time frame or average time frame on an investigation from start to finish?
That's a difficult one to answer because I've explained in the past. Like I have a stage from the administrative review to when I decide whether an investigation is necessary to ensure compliance with the Act or the code, the complexity of the files, the availability of witnesses, but also if I have reasonable grounds to believe that the Act or the code has been breached, then I'm required to send it to the RCMP. And once it's there, the file's in a state of suspension, and the average of it being over there has been about 7 to 8 months. So it's very hard to then predict. There's also, if I'm tabling a report on the Lobbyist Code of Conduct to Parliament, the opportunity to prevent review stage, which can take time as well at the end.
How many have you referred to the RCMP?
Since I became commissioner, 10.
Okay. When you refer them to the RCMP, do you make a public statement that you've now got to this stage in this investigation?
I do not. As I've said in the past, I mean, the Act requires that I conduct my looking into a file in private, and I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One, it protects the integrity of my investigation. It also protects the integrity of a future police investigation. So saying where I am in the process, and I've maybe transferred it over, could jeopardize perhaps the investigation being done by the police.
Anyone that comes back from the police where they don't act on, you will report that you did send it to the RCMP.
Well, in my if I decide when I'm looking at it that I have sufficient grounds to continue with the Lobbyist Code of Conduct investigation, then I will, in that report, I mentioned, for example, in the Raheem Jaffer case, I sort of said, that file had been transferred to the RCMP when it came back and so on. So those reports would actually contain that information. If I do not proceed, I usually have a mark in my annual report that refers to the fact that I had sent something over. So that's how I would report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Merci, M. Andrews. Maintenant, je passe à...
Ms. Davidson, you now have the floor for 7 minutes.
Welcome back again, and to you and your colleagues. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I want to spend most of my time just asking you some questions on your opening remarks, some clarification to those. You talked on the first part about the how you told us last time you were here in 2012 that how you were going to be rearranging your department and how you were going to have a couple of different staff with the deferring the development of the registration system and secondly hiring the system specialists. So can you just tell us a little bit about how this happened and how I know that you feel that it's working well and why you feel it's working well and if there has been any downside to this?
Well, in terms of when I was here before the committee last year, in terms of the 2 positions, I mean, I cut 2 positions in order to increase my capacity in financial management and in performance management and program evaluation. What I can say is that the 2 posts that I cut, there were 2 individuals sitting in those positions, and one took the opportunity to retire. The other individual has found employment elsewhere. In terms of hiring the system specialist, that's a result of reducing dependency on consultants. And that individual started with us April 1st and fits in very well with the organization. And so I'm quite confident that we'll be able to do what we need to do in terms of the registry this year, in terms of the integrity of the documentation and so on.
So April 1st of this year, that person
April 1st,
started?
2013, because that's when my budget was actually cut. Yeah. So the process last year was very much in, writing the job description, staffing the position, that it would start April 1st, and that was all done. And like I said, the other 2 positions had been filled, and the individuals are fitting in very well with the organization.
Okay. So next year we will hear more about how that has worked out then.
Yes.
I expect. You talked about the audit, the internal audit. Mm-hmm. Who did that? Was it consultants that did it, or was it?
Yes, it was a consulting firm that came in, and
All right. And you were satisfied with the conclusions of it? You felt it was justifiable, what was happening within the department?
I was, because it showed that the things that we had put in place in terms of the system, that we very much have, a robust system, that it is accurately capturing the data, that we have processes in place that are being followed in terms of being able to retrieve the data and report on it. It brought some, as any audit does, there's always suggestions as to what you can do to improve things. I mean, on the training side, it recognized that we had a lot of things in place, but suggested we formalize things a little bit better. In terms of, we had been without a CIO, I'm trying to remember the thing with that, but in terms of the computer system for a period of time. And so there were some things that it felt in terms of, could have been better and better, because you speak to speak when you're dealing with a service provider, if I can put it that way. And so we've got a full-time service CIO, so that's taken care of. And it suggested some improvements in IT. And when you're looking at the fact that technology keeps advancing, you want to ensure that the system is well protected, and that's things that we'll be looking at this year and following up on.
Okay. When you talked about education and research, you talked about the amount of money that you allocate to public education activities. And I wondered, what are those activities? How do you do public education?
Well, part of that is the actual salaries of the individuals that are involved. It's the costs of maintaining the website, of any of the documents that are done. If there's some travel and so on, that's allocated towards that activity. And this
What
year-
are the actual activities that you do? Like, are they going out and speaking
Yes.
engagements at what types of organizations?
Well, there's a variety. I've been invited, as I was mentioning, to speak to certain universities, for example, meeting with public office holders. There were 900 different events where we met one-on-one, or 900 people that we reached through doing actual presentations. We've spoken at the Canada School as well, which is, offering courses to public servants. It's another great way of getting the outreach. We've, on the registration side, have met with particular lobbying firms and so on, and did a little bit more in-depth analysis with them. The registration side, as I mentioned, is doing webinars and things with some of the first-time registrants on their questions, or others who may not be close to the city. Taking advantage of technology is, I think, a wonderful thing.
So is the education portion of it sort of divided between the personal, hands-on, actually being there, giving a seminar or education, and the website and the information that is available for people to access at any time?
Exactly. It's a mixture of all of those different components.
Okay. When you talked about the review and the investigations, you said that since you'd become commissioner, you'd initiated 101. Mm-hmm. And I've got something marked. You've initiated 101 administrative review files and completed 105. Is that 105 out of the 110 total?
Well, what it is, as I mentioned, I inherited 40 administrative review files and 6 investigation files. So this
Right.
is not only closing files that I'm opening under my tenure since 2008, but also closing some of the administrative review files that existed from my predecessor that I inherited in 2008.
And would some of those still be there from before 2008?
As I mentioned, there's all but 2 now that are all of them have been completed except for 2.
So there's just the 2. And then you went on to say that you wanted to avoid any given file becoming too old. So what would be too old? Like, what's the normal time frame?
I mean, what we're looking at is, it's always easy when files are coming in. Some tend to be have more serious allegations that you want to be, getting out there as quickly as possible. But at the same time, you don't want to have the old files just sort of sitting there. So.
Or of making sure that something doesn't just get put aside and never dealt with.
That's right. We have the investigations team is handling at any one time between 50 and 60 files. That includes exemption reviews, which have service standards associated with them. So they actually are done quite quickly because people are making decisions on jobs, for example. Then you're sort of looking at and determining, like, the priority files. What's the seriousness of the complexity, the seriousness of the allegation. So if that's like one example that would be used for the prioritization of the file, or how long do we estimate that it's going to take to complete? Because just from looking at it at the outside, you can say, oh, this is going to be very complex. There's a number of interviews involved. We're going to have to maybe plan travel in some cases, and so all of that is factored in. But the investigations team is constantly doing a triage of sort of moving files around as necessary.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Gretchen. Merci, Madame Shepherd. Maintenant.
Thank you. Mr. Boulris, you now have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Ms. Shepherd. Thank you for coming before the committee today. It's always interesting to hear what you have to say. I'd just like to give you some background here. In Quebec, for several months now, we've been watching this very interesting show in the name of the Charbonneau Commission. So this is a sweeping investigation into corruption in the construction industry. And it seems to be spilling over into other examples. There are people at the municipal level as well who have come testify, and provincial level even are implicated. So do you feel that we here in the federal government are sheltered from this? We have this act, we have the resources of your own office, and therefore do we have the ability to really rest assured that what's happening in Montreal won't be happening here? Well, Mr. Chairman, what I would say is this. It's very important that there be consequences to one's actions. And that's why I've tabled these reports in Parliament, the performance reports. And when I tabled the reports, when I do table the reports, the phone starts ringing because people want to make sure they're in compliance with the Act. Earlier, a question was put about outreach and education. Outreach is very, very important in order to ensure that individuals understand very clearly what their responsibilities are under the Act, and that they also understand the Code of Conduct. And that's why we do this kind of outreach or education. I take all allegations very seriously. And so if you take all this together, I think that it helps us avoid those kinds of situations. In 2008, you were appointed. Well, 2009, because I was the interim commissioner, and then I was appointed commissioner. So over the past 5 years, 10 files have been referred to the RCMP. Yes. So in a context where federal government is responsible for all kinds of programs, infrastructure programs, there are 5,000 lobbyists on Parliament Hill, full-time lobbyists. Therefore, does this mean all is well, or that we don't necessarily have the tools we need in order to ensure, in fact, that there is no conflict of interest and individuals who are able to take advantage from contracts from the federal government? Because it's very difficult to imagine that nothing would be happening on Parliament Hill when you see the extent of what the Commission, the Charbonneau Commission, has revealed. Well, when I do outreach, I don't just educate people about lobbyists. I really do a lot of outreach with members of Parliament. And often people ask me, well, what is a best practice? And my answer is that best practice means that for public office holders, when they want to have an arranged meeting with you, you need to ask yourself, are you aware that there is a Lobbyist Act? And if the answer is yes, then the next question is, do you know if you're compliant with the Act? So that's another way of helping individuals avoid those kinds of situations that are problematic. On the 14th of May 2012, the committee tabled a report on the statutory view of the Lobbying Act. And on the 2012 report, the government supported recommendation number 5 and 9. But for 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8, they stated that they looked at the various approaches, that they will actually, and that it will take 2, 10, and 11 into account. What kind of follow-up do you think should be done for the statutory review of the Lobbying Act, and what is your opinion regarding the committee's report and the government's response? Well, as I said in response to another question, I believe the government has indicated that they want to make changes that will strengthen the Act. And so in terms of monetary administrative penalties, perhaps we should be looking at what's happening in other provinces, what's working well, what their criteria are. And I'm willing to provide any kind of opinion or advice to the government on how this can work under the Act. Because the other concern is whether or not any changes are clear to lobbyists and also to public office holders. So I think that's where the emphasis has to be and the clarity of the decisions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boulris. I think the committee is quite happy with your responses today, so that will wrap up our meeting with you. But before I wrap up, I have to put the question to the vote.
Or to carry. Oui. Donc, parfait. Et je vous rappelle qu'on se rencontre.
Yes. Then I'd just like to remind the committee we'll be meeting next Wednesday, and that we'll be speaking about the evidence presented before the committee on the conflict of interest. And so Wednesday, 12 o'clock is the deadline, rather Tuesday, for the witness list. Did you have anything to add? Yes. I just want to clarify something I said. I spoke about one of the charges against a lobbyist. I just want to say it's not Mr. Carson. So if the committee wants, I can send you information that's public. Yes, if it's public, please, you can send it to the clerk. That then wraps up our meeting, and thank you for coming today and taking the time to meet with us. The meeting is adjourned.